Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education on Monday, October 7th, 2024. If y'all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Can I first get a motion to review and approve the agenda of October 7th, 2024? Erica, second. Matt, all in favor? Next, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of September 16th, 2024, please? Brendan, second. Matt Wexler, all in favor? Excellent, thank you. Moving on to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allowed to each speaker for a maximum of 5 on each topic. Would anybody like to approach the board? That doesn't work here. I'm just kidding.
You'll get there, too.
Yeah. Seeing there's none, we'll move on to reports and recognition. Dr. Lutz, you want to introduce? Thank you.
All right, love to. So it's my pleasure tonight to welcome Principal Egan from New Canaan High School and his group of department leaders and district administrators and others that make up our leadership team here at the high school. As we do annually, Bill's here to share with us the assessment results that from assessments that were taken throughout last year. And as department leaders will be speaking on behalf of each of their departments, some of the initiatives and ideas as we continue in our work. It is I don't want to say lengthy, substantive presentation. And we are very excited to hear from all of you. So thank you all for being here with us tonight. Principal Egan.
Well, thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, as always. One of the honors of my life has been to be the principal of New Canaan High School, and truly I think it's a great community with caring parents, the best kids in the state of Connecticut, and amazing faculty that works with them. So it's always a pleasure to be here, but I will start with some introductions. Oops. Chrissy's here to help me and then also help me mess up. So there's a few people I want to make sure I introduce. This is our entire K-12 team, but I will introduce the people that work with the high school. Susan Bliss is our student support coordinator, spent a lot of time at the high school with us. Jay Egan is our PE and K-12 health coordinator. We also have Mike Fercucci, social studies coordinator, who's here this evening. We have Kevin Holly, our K-12 director of world language arts and ELL director. Michael LeDuc is our science department chair. Michelle Ludula is our ICT department chair. Danny Meltzer is also with health and PE, our assistant athletic director. Linda Meyer is here. She's our director of innovation. Laura Newell is here. She's our visual and performing arts director, K-12. Becky Pavia is our 9 through 12 department chair for math. Evan Remley is our English and Language Arts Department Chair. Cindy Rivera can't be here this evening, but Erica Shaler is here, as well as the great Sue Carroll is here to provide support and extra answers for us from the guidance perspective. Kevin Ryan is our Special Ed Director here at the high school. Matt Salvestrini is our Digital Learning K-12 Director. Mike Tisch is also a health and PE he works at the high school, but does some work at the elementary school as well. I believe that's just about everybody. Jim Zambrano, we left off the list somehow, which is never an easy thing. It's Jim Zambrano out there. And then also our assistant principals. I have Christy Carrero here, I have Ari Rothman in the back, and Larry Sullivan is here as well. They've provided valuable assistance to us at the high school. Let's get started. We'll talk briefly about our philosophy of assessment, which you guys are aware of, but I think there's a couple of really important things I want to make sure that we touch upon. It's obviously the support and enhance student learning for all students, and we should consider a wide range of assessments. No one assessment should be indicative of the work that we do. Briefly, our vision here at the high school is we want a school community where parents want to send their kids, where students want to learn and enjoy being part of the community, and all members of the school community, including faculty and staff, feel respected, valued, and love come to school, always doing what's in the best interest of students. Our 2023-24 school year was an excellent year for New Canaan High School. We're blessed again with a wonderful staff, supportive community, and the best kids in the state of Connecticut. They work hard and are talented and kind, considerate people. We're lucky to work with them. We want to continue to grow, and we'll push to get even better, always looking out for the well-being of our students and staff. First, we'll start taking a look at the SAT. First of all, what is the SAT? There are 2 sections, math and evidence-based reading and writing. Each section is scored on a range of 200 to 800. Students in grade 11 must take the Connecticut SAT, and the Connecticut SAT is aligned to Connecticut core standards, which is embedded in our curriculum. How have we done? In the past 3 years, our scores are up there, our total scores. We dipped a little bit from last year, up from 2022. In the DERG last year, we were at 600, up a point in evidence-based reading and writing, and 590 for math. Over time, as I said, the last 3 years, we're on a slight upward trend. Down a little bit from our COVID, pre-COVID time period. 2020, I'll point out, was a non-Connecticut SAT year, so that's really looking at all student data that year that's up there, but we wanted to have something up there. But if you were to do that, all scores would be higher. Like last year would be, I think it's 610, and it would be 616 for math. So it would raise the scores significantly if you looked at all kids. And by all kids, I mean all kids, all tests kind of super scored. The Connecticut SAT is one day, one time, depending who takes the test, depending on a variety of factors, really. Interesting data. We've always taken a look at the gender breakdown. Last year was an interesting data point as well as the year before, in the sense that our males happened to beat our females in both ELA and math. So the evidence-based reading, writing, and math. That's 2 years in a row, and sometimes if you look at that and say 1 year, it's interesting. 2 years, while not quite a trend, it's certainly an interesting data point. I did try and break it out even further, taking a look at the data for the students for the whole year, but it was hard for me to get the gender breakdown on that, so I couldn't. But if you look at an average, from 2018 to 2022, our males, or our females did stronger in, our females did stronger in English, and I have to be tutored on my female and male science, and our boys did stronger in math. However, 2 years ago, the boys did better in both math and in English, with a stronger emphasis in the math scores. And last year, while it's more closely aligned, the boys still did better in both math and in English, at least on the school day SAT. Interesting, I did break out, it's not in this assessment report, but I did break out overall GPAs. The GPAs for the females are a little bit higher than the males in the whole school. So just another data point to take a look at. Taking a look at some college statistics, and I'm going to go through the data, and then I'm going to call up some department chairs or some people to kind of help work through kind of the next steps. We have a great deal of our student population attending four-year colleges. 93% of our students attend a four-year university. This is a new data point that people have asked about in the past as well. Where are our kids applying? So up on the board, you'll see UConn is our top school that people apply to, which is not surprising, being our state university. But you'll notice on this list, there's the bigger universities. You know, some of the smaller privates have kind of slipped down on the most applied to list. But you could take a look. That's not surprising on the names of the schools on this list. You have, Michigan, Syracuse is up there, Clemson's up there, UVA, Wisconsin, BC for the BC fans up on the Board of Ed. And obviously University of Colorado's there as well. But then you take a look at where are the kids going. So these are the most popular enrollments. So many of those are on that list. So you'll take a look and you see UConn, Syracuse, Bucknell, Northeastern. My eyes are not as good as they used to be. Michigan, Miami of Ohio, Providence is on that list. Brigham Young is on that list. Indiana, Sacred Heart is on the list. The state community colleges are on that list. Colorado's on that list. Wisconsin, Boston College again, Colgate, and Richmond as well. And I know Dr. Lutzy is always a fan of where Clemson is, and they're just off the total of the top 10, but you'll see he did make it up there for number 4 on the list as well. So a special kudos to Michelle Lulu, who helped design this presentation. That was really her idea to put his face up there. So how many kids and where are they applying? So basically, it's about nine and a half applications per college per child, if you look at an average. So it's 2,932 applications to 341 colleges from 309 students. There are 4 students attending international universities. There are 6 students attending a 2-year college. There are 8 students attending a gap year. This has gone up a little bit each of the last few years. I believe a few years ago it was like 3, and then last year I think it was like 4 or 5, and 8 this year. So interesting. And there's a variety of reasons why they do that. Some want to travel before they go to school. There's a variety of reasons why people could take a gap year. 100% of our students have a plan when they leave New Canaan High School. And this is an interesting data point. 47% of our students last year did not submit SAT or ACT scores to schools that they attended. So they chose not to send scores and chose just to say, take a look at my program as a whole without sending scores in. That's up. So we saw that trend start really a few years back. In 2022, there were 35% of the graduating class who did not submit scores. Last year it was 43%, and this year it's 47%. There's a variety of reasons for that, but certainly our kids are still getting into outstanding universities, even though less kids are sending scores over time. At this point, I'm going to invite Erica Shadler to come up and talk about our next steps in counseling. And if you guys have any questions after that, we can stop and take some questions. Erica's here, and Sue Carroll is another expert here, as well as myself, to answer any questions. But you just hit your next button, and I'll take your next thing.
Okay.
It's really one slide that makes it look like a lot of slides.
I know. I have my clicker up here. Thank you. So I would say this year, one of our primary goals as a department is really to increase our communication. And more than that, really try to diversify the ways in which we are presenting the ever-changing and incredibly complex facts around the college admissions process. So whether that's our social media platforms like Instagram and X, we're very proud of those. We are pretty sure we're going to be viral one of these days. Or our updated counselor chronicles, we're really trying our best to be very transparent about the data that's coming from colleges and universities and getting that to you all as succinctly as possible, because it is a lot and it is ever changing. Each year, the counselors are also very purposeful around our travel and seek out college trips that will allow us to both connect with some of our favorite and very popular colleges and universities, but that will also allow us to hopefully discover some hidden gems or lesser known universities that are in and around those very popular areas. And I'll use last year, I went to Nashville as an example. I think everybody in the room knows our students love Vanderbilt. It's one of our most applied to schools. That being said, it's also a very selective school. So it was one of our missions to identify other universities in and around the amazing Nashville that would still offer students some incredibly robust academic opportunities, still give them access to the city that they love, but aren't quite as selective as Vanderbilt. And it was a fantastic trip. So additionally, we always do our best to send counselors to both NACAC and NEACAC. We love an acronym. Those are two of probably the biggest and certainly most relevant to our department, big college expos and college fairs. Oh, thank you. In June, the department meets as a whole to review admissions decisions from that year. From that meeting, we then target schools that there are either surprises, so maybe we were a bit confused by some of the decisions that came back, or there were trends that are starting to look a little bit differently than, again, what we would expect from that college or university. And we will target those schools to then have face-to-face conversations with the admissions reps when they come to visit us at New Canaan in the fall. These are great opportunities to just kind of, again, ask them, like, what went on with this kind of weird decision? Or, you know, we used to see you accepting a much bigger population of our students, and that looks like it's changing. In the past 2 weeks, I've had the chance to meet with both the representative from Tulane and Boston College, so that's just a really active part of our fall. Thank you. In addition, we will often consult with college representatives concerning the recent trends in their scores. We understand that when it comes to standardized testing specifically, it can really feel like there's no easy way to answer, should I send my scores or should I not send my scores? And in addition to doing our own independent research, obviously, we will rely on our college reps and the relationships that we have with admissions departments to ask them in this specific case, right, with this data, what would you recommend? And college representatives are wonderful. They're very willing to engage in those conversations with us, as well as their future applicants. So we're encouraging students to have those conversations as well. So I would hope that this goes very much without saying, but we are really, really strong in our messaging to students that there should be no use of AI in any aspect of their applications. College admissions reps are very, very honest in that they're not using AI in any part of their review process, and they do not want to see it or have any inkling that it was used in the application process, and we're very clear with that messaging to our students. We also take it as an opportunity to kind of refocus students and encourage them to pay more attention to the spots of their application where they can have a bit of a personality. So whether that's through their supplements and helping them to articulate why they're actually a great fit for that school, or helping them develop their voice and, you know, show some of their quirks in their personal essay, we're again really encouraging them to steer away from AI and use that as an opportunity to let their voice be heard in their application. So blind admissions is a process that I know I personally have never seen outside of a private school. It's something that I think we're really lucky to do here. And essentially, in the middle of November, counselors will all meet as a department and start this blind admissions process, where we'll review all of our students' admissions data. So we're going to be looking at their GPA, their test scores, and then their list of schools to ensure that they have a reasonable, compilation of targets, reaches, and likelies, which for those of you who have had students, you should know exactly what that means by now. If for some reason we are not feeling confident in their list, or they've had some surprises come back with some decisions that we thought would be favorable but aren't, we again review that list and we'll send out recommendations based on what we're seeing in that data and those decisions. Naviance is a tool that we use with all of our students throughout all 4 years of high school. The primary purpose of Naviance is eventually going to be to lead them through their post-secondary research and planning process, and eventually that's how we'll submit our application materials. So this year, we're very excited to be expanding the way in which we interact with Naviance. We're still kind of getting used to it, but one of, I think, the most exciting new features is going to be a course planning tool that allows students to, again, if you've had a student with me before, you've seen their 4-year plan. This is going to integrate that 4-year plan into Naviance and really allow them to combine all of their platforms and, again, hopefully be very comfortable in Naviance by the time they're seniors. Every year in April, we also hold a college panel, which I would highly recommend that everybody attend. And again, we're very purposeful about who we're inviting to that college panel, why we're inviting those representatives, and we're always making sure that whatever college or university it is that we're inviting, it's someone within the admissions department who has some sort of leadership role. So it's another just great opportunity for us to collaborate with those individuals, get a sense for what their potential institutional needs are, what they're seeing from our applicants, and then also, give families the opportunity to hear directly from those experts. And last but not least, we recognize that the college admissions process is incredibly stressful for students and families. They do not go through this alone. And we hold several workshops throughout the year, hopefully to help demystify everything around the process. So Some of the upcoming events that we have, we're holding a University of California application workshop. We're also holding an applying to the UK application workshop. We have financial aid night coming up this week. Again, highly recommend everybody attend. And then last but not least, the one that I personally am most excited about, we have our Senior Application Support Initiative that we are calling SASSY, trying to get the kids to remember it somehow. And this is going to be offered really throughout the school year. It's an opportunity for students to come into the College and Career Center, work with the amazing Susan Carroll and another one of our counselors to get ideally one-on-one or very small group targeted support around wherever they're at in their application process. In addition, we're also incredibly lucky that we've had the PFA continue to support our work with the College Essay Guy. Again, I'm a little bit biased, but I love the opportunity for students to take advantage of those workshops and then also be working with our writing center. The English department has done a fantastic job of integrating work with the College Essay Guy right into the writing center. So again, students throughout the day during their free periods can just pop on in and get some really targeted and informed support around their supplements and their personal essays and such. And that's all I got for you.
Do you want to open up, before we go on, do you want to open up this part to questions? I know this college part always takes on a lot of questions if you want.
Thank you. Do we have questions so far? I think it's probably smart to, yeah, Penny?
Yeah, no, I have. Thank you so much, all of you, for everything you do for our students and the tremendous support that you give them. So I just had a couple of questions. One, I was wondering, we had, in prior years and prior presentations, for whatever it was worth, we were trying to analyze like what kinds of different schools the kids went to, and we had a stat on, percentage that went to, competitive schools, selective, most selective. Do we have that stat again this year? How do we do, just as to benchmark compared to other years?
So in terms of the most competitive schools, I can reach back out to you with more data, but I did look into approximately how many of our students are applying and then accepted to Ivies. I don't think that totally encompasses, right, kind of that next echelon, which is a hugely popular group for our students. But in terms of the Ivies, we submitted around 100 applications to Ivy League schools last year. That's out of a total amount of about 300 students. But what's complex there is we're not actually aggregating based on student. We can only see applications. So I could have one student, right, who applied to 4 different schools.
And also, Penny, the competitive, most competitive is a Barron's guide. We always use the Barron's guide.
Right.
Hasn't been published since 2018.
Oh, okay. That'll make it harder to
So
get
those
that stat.
terminologies are old-fashioned by the publishing of this information.
Okay. Then I was also wondering on the test prep. I mean, it's so hard to understand what's going on with the SAT since everybody has to take it, but some people know they're not going to submit it. So are students taking as many, test prep classes as they used to take, or not, because they know they're not going to submit?
We don't have the actual data on that, but the answer I think has to be no. If 47% of our students are not submitting scores, the amount of students taking test prep is likely to be less. So now that said, we are looking to make a partnership with a test prep company that works here and trying to get more kids who might need some assistance to get into some test prep, to be able to access test prep that maybe couldn't get it previously. So that's one thing we're trying to do to get more students to be able to take test prep that maybe couldn't access it.
Okay.
I think additionally, as we move, fully towards the digital SAT, the way students prep will start to look a little bit different. There are incredible free resources for our students through College Board, through Blue Book, that they can access on their own. Again, I just don't think they're really used to doing that just yet, but that is available to them, so.
Matt?
So, a couple things, again, hitting on SATs again, because that's sort of an area of concern. It's lower than expected. The 47% that don't submit scores, right? Now, how does that compare? I'm trying to find the percentage of students that apply to four-year universities. Is it 93? Is that it?
93% attend.
So 93% attend, right? So obviously those 93% applied. So we're saying that roughly half of those, again, if we're assuming the same population, didn't submit scores.
Yep.
So there was obviously a need, and so therefore they probably would prepare in some degree for those scores. So what I draw from that is that 47% underperformed their expectations or the expectations of what is required for the school. Because obviously if it was above average score, top quartile score for that school, they would have submitted the score, right?
Or they changed how they look at their application process, to be fair. So some may look at their core curriculum as the focus of their application to college. They may know automatically that they're not looking to use their scores, or invest the time in, say, test prep or things like that to raise their scores to a certain level. You know, the averages for all of these universities have changed significantly from what they used to be. I think we were told the other day, can I share about Tulane came? They said if you don't have a 15, or was it 1,400, don't apply. You know, don't send your scores. Don't even think of sending your scores. Now, that being said, their average score to get in was 1460 for those that sent. So it's changed the game on sending scores, or game, I shouldn't say game.
Yeah.
It's changed how you look at sending scores. So I do think kids and families have made different decisions, and 95% of schools are test optional.
Well, that's I mean, you basically illustrated my point. That's where I'm getting, is that you would only submit your score if you thought it was, again, regardless of what the score is, it's a data point. And you'd only submit that if it's a data point that's in your favor, right? And so therefore, the inflation of the scores, by definition, increases, right? Because only those who have higher scores
Fair.
are submitted scores, and it becomes even more selective, right? So I guess what I'm going back to is that why is it that our students that are, we have 47% of students that by all their metrics, they think that they have a shot at this school, but yet they're not performing at a level that is required to, or on average required to get into that school, right? It seems like there's a breakdown in,
I don't know if you can say that, because they still may get into that school. They just may not have submitted their scores to get into that school.
okay, or they didn't get in, right? It's because the 93% is how many applied, right? Not necessarily, or that applied to four-year schools, right?
93% of our schools, 93% of our kids attend four-year schools.
So how many get into their first choice? Do you have statistics as far as ranking, as far as
We
choice?
did have that. It was at 80, I think it was like 85% who get into their top three choices.
Okay,
They look
but
at
not
this.
necessarily the top. And now, from everything that I've heard from people, both in admissions officers and others in college, that they're moving back to testing, right? Given the fact that there's great inflation makes it difficult to sort of normalize or standardize across different school districts,
The most selective schools certainly are.
the most selective schools, correct?
Not all of them, though, either.
Also, the use of the school profile is very, very important, Mr. Campbell. The AP array, you're going to get to AP scores soon, but you can tell by how many kids got a 5 on the AP and what our grade range, for example, is, that we're not a school that really experiences grade inflation. That school profile is so very important when each of our students' application is being read, whether they submitted scores or not. That tells a really good story about, besides how high our GPAs are and how many kids are taking really challenging courses. That's, at the end of the day, except for maybe 18 colleges. Oh, thank you.
I heard her just fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm Irish. My voice is not my problem. Except for those 18 colleges that are requiring scores, and there will be a couple of more added next year that will go back to scores, that's really not where the story is. That's really not. And I would be shocked if the state of Connecticut does not reconsider the SAT or having this particular standard in the near future, because we are not alone in not sending scores. Our cohort is very similar.
Okay, and so I guess in thinking about the SAT, right, and sort of, I get, these are just the data for the national, for the school day, right?
Correct.
The school day SATs. So, okay, so it's incomplete, I guess, in looking at scores. Do we have a sense of what are, I'm assuming we have the data of what the overall, the top score of all of our students is, regardless of whether it's a school day SAT or ones they take subsequently and on
That'd be
their
a
own?
perfect score.
What'd you say?
That'd be a perfect score.
No.
Well, for each student? I'm sorry.
So I'm saying to super score, or for example, let's say in their junior year, right, they take the SAT.
Yeah.
Right, so in subsequent, months or, the following year, they may take their SATs again to try to improve their score. do we have a sense of what the average high score, the average super score of our students is?
610.
And how that compares to
and
this.
616.
So it's not much different.
Well, it's 10 points different.
10 points higher, so
for-
not much
for-
difference from-
language arts. Well, 10 points is 10 points.
from here. So I guess, do we, and we don't have, as Penny asked, we don't have the prep data. Do we know how that compares to the students that take ACTs, how their translated scores compare?
I know our kids do very well on the ACT as well, but there's only about 70 to 80 kids that take the ACT. So the data is a tough thing to look at and say, well, what does this really mean when you have 70 kids take the ACT?
But even with all the shortcomings of the data, what's the translated score? How do they compare?
They do, well, I don't know how to translate the score. I know what our averages were, and they're very strong. So, I mean, I could get you the exact numbers, I just don't have them on me.
Yeah, because I mean, I think College Board has sort of somewhat of a range, I guess. Of
I'd have
types
to
of
take a
score. The
look.
reason why I'm asking is just to better understand sort of, again, is this, because by one of the criticisms of the SAT is that it's people say it's socioeconomically biased and that there's ways to prepare for it, which you would think would favor a district like New Canaan, right? That there's means and there's ability to prepare and strategize for it, as compared to the ACT, which is a little more content-based and harder to prepare for. And so it would seem to me that we would do, on average, better on the SAT, given the preparation. And if not, then is there something that we could offer as a school district, maybe in junior year, sophomore year, that helps prepare these students, analogous to sort of like an ACES class, that's sort of like an elective that focuses on SAT prep, to sort of help these students prepare for this exam better?
Certainly, you're going to hear from some of the people who are talking about changing how they do certain things. Like you'll hear Writing Center a little bit later is going to talk about pushing in to classes to try and help do things. You're going to hear about math, actually building in problem sets of what they do. And again, I talked about partnering with that test prep company who's going to come give strategies to our teachers during our professional day in November. So they're going to spend an hour and a half with both the English and language arts people and also the math people to try and give maybe some tips that they can start to build things into the curriculum that wouldn't change just not teaching to the test, but can help enhance what they do on the regular to try and help assist with their scores. So those are some ways that we're trying to kind of build that up.
Okay, great. Great job, Erica. Erica's my favorite counselor, by the way.
I didn't even pay you to say that.
If I didn't give her a plug, so there you go.
You could save your great job for me to the end.
Well, don't get ahead of yourself, Bill.
Fair enough. Now let's take a look at some other ways we look at how we do things here at the high school. So we take a look at our college level courses. Well, what are our college level courses here at the high school? They are advanced placement courses. They are early college experience courses through UConn. They are Project Lead the Way courses through University of New Haven. There are Norwalk Community College partnerships that we have here as well. Teachers for each of these who teach these courses are trained to help enhance the students in those courses. So how did we do last year? So last year we had 512 students take these courses. That's up 76 from the year before. Cultural anthropology was a big course for us last year. Expanded sections, economics. You'll take a look in some of our data. You'll see in the AP, because it's AP and ECE, those numbers really kind of exploded last year as well. Our percentage of students that take a college level course here at the high school, 85.4% of our students take a college level course. We'd love to get as many students as possible. When I got here, it was about 77% of our students who took a college level course. 85.4% of our students took a college level course last year. Advanced placement. So what are AP tests? So they're designed to give an intro to college level course while still in high school. They test at the end of the year. The scores are 1 to 5. A 3+ is the goal. That signifies a 75 or better on a college level course. There are 29 different AP classes we teach at the high school. They're designed to demonstrate a passion, and generally the most rigorous courses that are available at high school level. There's a combination total of 40 total tests through the AP, I guess, brand, and they're a mix of paper and digital, but they're pushing more digital. Some are hybrid as well. So how have our courses trended here at the high school? In 2011, I don't know who the principal was, but there was 18 courses at that point, but there are 29 now. See, now you're getting there, man.
It's all relative, though. It's all relative.
But there are 29 courses here at the high school. Let's take a look at our participation. I could probably spend an hour on this chart alone. So again, I don't mean to go back to the days of 2010 or 11, but back in 2010 there were 457 tests in the building. Last year there were 1,439 AP tests in the building. There were 275 tests in 2010. 275 individual test takers. Last year there were 559. So we increased that number from the year before by 50 kids. That's significant. The year before that, by 50 kids. That's really a great deal of kids with our population to be able to kind of continue to move up like that. I'm not saying we can continue to do that every year, but that's really a tremendous amount of growth in our AP students, kids that are getting access to courses. We talked a little bit, you were talking about access before, Mr. Campbell. This is one of the biggest ways that students can get access here in the building. And how did they do? 95.6 or 96.5? My eyes are struggle from here. 95.6, right? You can't even read. 90, I think it's 95.6% percentage of our students got a 3 or better. That's the second highest percentage of our students ever taking AP tests that got a 3 or better, while exploding in population growth. So, it used to be that if more kids take it, you're going to see these numbers drop off. Well, that's really kind of the opposite of that. The more kids take it, they continue to do really, really well. It's a testament to our amazing kids, to our teachers, and to the community as a whole. You want to say something, don't you, Dr. Lutz?
I do. I just want to jump in for a moment. Can you go back a slide?
Yeah.
I think this is a big part of the story, right? That back in 2010, you had about a dozen, maybe 13 courses that were available to students at the AP level. And what's happened since then is the faculty, the administration, others have been really engaged in talking to the kids, finding out where their interests lie, and then doing the training and building the catalog and expanding the opportunities for kids. And I think that that's really a testament to certainly the leadership and the commitment of the faculty and those conversations and the work that's done with the kids. So as we learn what they're interested in and we start to build out these programs, they enroll and they take those classes. And so now, instead of it just being available to a few kids that are on a very narrow track, it's now AP courses are available to that many more kids in their areas of strength. Right, so they may be able to go into it in an art class or a music class or an econ or other history course offerings, that it's an area of strength for them where they can excel instead of only this a narrow slice of what was possible. So it's really a testament to the entire faculty and everyone's commitment to expanding these opportunities.
Agreed, and I think it also plays a part in what we were talking about just before about our colleges and where kids are going and how they're choosing to look at colleges. Many of them are looking at their overall program than just a test in and of itself. Anyway, this is outstanding data. But then take a look at, percentage of senior class that gets a 3 or better. So 217 out of the 309, I think it was 308 or 309 kids, that's 67.5%. I rounded up for my own purposes to 68% of the senior class that got a 3 or better. Now, take a look at AP and honors. Well, there's another group of kids maybe that didn't take an AP, that didn't take other college courses, but how about if they're taking honors courses? Well, only 13% of our entire school population does not take either an AP or honors course. So we're taking really rigorous courses at this school, and our kids are doing very, very well. Now, take a look at AP Scholars. So what is an AP Scholar? So if you get a 3 or better on 3 or more exams, you're an AP Scholar. That's great, right? You got what's a 75 or 3 or more exams. Now, if you're an AP Scholar with honors, that's a 3.25 average on all exams, 3 or higher on 4 more exams, even more rigorous. How about an AP Scholar with distinction? That's a 3.5 average on all exams, 3 or higher on 5 or more exams. That's a lot of college level courses in high school. There are 303 of those types of students in this building, with an average score of 4.15. So what Sue was talking about before with our scores, our average score for those honors, for all those kids who are AP Scholars is 4.15 average, for all of them. There are 303 of them, distinct kids in this building. How does that compare over time? I know this chart's busy. You guys, it'll look easier on your own chart, but I know this chart's busy. The year before, there was 248. Now, it will bounce. This will bounce a little bit, but if you go all the way down to 2016, which is not that long ago, it was 161 kids in this building. So that's pretty much doubled the amount of AP scholars. Again, amazing. They're taking more rigorous academic programs and doing really, really well. Honestly, to me, I think it's a testament of pride for the whole community. You can take a look. I won't bore you with all of the particular courses that we offer and how they do, but they do really well. I mean, basically 90% or better in just about every area, or it's grown in just about every area. I'll flip to the next slide. There's a couple I wanted to point out that were particularly interesting. Well, even U.S. history. There was a couple years ago we had flipped to a heterogeneous course in the 9th grade level, and people were like, well, will that really expand the amount of students who have access to that AP course in 10th grade? Well, back in 2020, there were 70 kids that took the AP test, 97% of them passed. Last year, 130 took the AP test, 97% of them passed. I think that's a tremendous story. That's U.S. history. The world history numbers are outstanding too, going from 63 and 97% to 117 and 96, which is really the sophomore year. How about computer science? This is another amazing story. 36 kids took it in 2020. 97% of them got a 3 or better. Last year, 93 students took it, and 99% of them got a 3 or better. It's an amazing story. Honestly, all of this is amazing, and I'm cherry picking certain things, but really you could look at all of it and say, wow, this is really something to be proud of. As a community, I think it's just outstanding. Again, our world language numbers are strong as well. And the percentage of students who take AP tests, well, where does this happen? What courses really, get a significant area of pursuit, I guess, for AP courses? Social studies is a big area. 38% of the school population takes, there are more offerings in social studies, so it makes sense. But you could take a look at all of the areas where they have opportunities for AP tests. And again, they do well in every area, but we'll show you that. So how do they do in each of these departments? Really outstanding. If you look over time, they continue to have an upward trend in both the numbers that take it, but the percentage of students who get a 3 or better every year in every subject area. Again, testament to our students, testament to our families, testament to our teachers. That's outstanding. Well, the percentage of students enrolled in AP courses. Back in 2017, it was about 87% of the population. Again, this isn't accurate necessarily, but if you think about it as we have 1,260 or so kids here at the high school, there are 1,439 tests, so it's about 120% of our population, I guess, when you look at it that way. Again, I talked about this earlier briefly. I mean, our goal when I got here was like, can we get kids to 60% of the senior class getting a 3 or better? Well, we get there every year now, and last year we did the best we ever did as far as the percentage of the senior class getting a 3 or better. That was 67.5%, as I like to say, 68% of the students who got a 3 or better. Next generation science. Any questions on either the other college options? What? Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't call on you. I apologize.
Yeah. Okay. I just have a question, a two-part question, kind of about scope and then meeting our students. So there's a couple spaces here like art history, and then obviously when we get into the visual and then the historical, where there's only one test taker. Mm-hmm. So is that like a student's doing it independently and we facilitate that? How do we meet? Because we can't do a class for just one student. How do
we merge many students in classes. So if we have a class, and Laura, you could speak to this and tell me if I'm saying it wrong, but basically we'll have a class that will, maybe that student will be embedded in another class.
Okay.
And they'll do that within that class.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Also that particular course, it depends on a portfolio. So you can build a body of work and then choose not to submit it based on what you want it for. So most of the time, they want to build that portfolio to submit for admissions, or they want to build it for themselves, and they may not want to submit it to AP College Board.
And does that is that kind of led by the student, or is that something you as counselors say to a student, like, hey, this is an option where we'll meet you and extend this program to you? Or how do we, like, I guess I'm wondering is how do we lead them, or is this, do we have some exceptional students who are self-motivated?
It's probably both, but I don't want to answer.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there are kids who are highly motivated to produce this kind of work. And again, it's kind of innate. It's for them. They want to build this body of work instead of having it judged or scored. And when you do an investigation like they do, sometimes it gets very deep and personal. So it becomes like something that they own. But a lot of the times they build it for like architecture school or design school or things like that. So it really depends on the type of student that enters or enrolls in the course.
And then I guess the converse of that is 2024, we have 37 pre-calculus. Is that,
It's an interesting thing.
did we just
So-
decide to open a pre-calculus? Or
Nope.
all of a sudden we had 37 students come forward and say they wanted one?
AP offers different offerings, right?
Yeah.
And pre-calculus didn't necessarily align with our curriculum. So, but we did say, hey, how about this group of kids? Why don't you give this a shot being in Algebra 2, or there were some in pre-calc as well, and said, hey, why don't you give this a shot? Well, 37 decided to give it a shot, and all 37 got a 3 or better. So we're looking to expand that this year and have more kids have that opportunity, because that's not something that we were teaching for. It was our curriculum aligned, and we said, we think you're going to do well on this. They did it, they took it, and all 37 got a 3 or better.
And so when you see things like that happen, is that a teacher taking on an additional course load, or was this something you have to plan for and we have to bring in another teacher?
It was us making a decision. No, there was no new teachers and no new course loads, no new costs.
It's not that, no, I'm just fascinated.
That's a real question.
I'm not him.
So an important point, though, you don't need to take an AP class to take an AP test. So it was taught
okay.
as an Algebra 2 or taught as the pre-calc, and then said,
I
hey,
didn't
do you
realize
want to sit for the pre-calc AP test?
Yeah.
But you
Okay.
don't need to be enrolled in a course to take the test.
So we're looking to expand that this year in the numbers of kids taking it, but it's the same concept.
Okay. Awesome, thank you.
Okay?
I was wondering, I had two questions. One, how are you doing on getting students, seniors, to take the AP tests? Because a lot of times they're like,
Better last year than the year
college,
before.
what is it?
But there's still some students who don't want to, but we're still, I think, I did run this number, I didn't include this here, so I think it was like 87% of our overall students took it. The number of seniors, I don't know what that is, but it was still strong. Hard for me to judge compared to what, right? Like to other schools or whatever, I don't know that. But still strong numbers of students taking the test.
Right, and I think, we don't require it, which I think is probably the right place to be.
We shifted that, and we haven't seen any downside to shifting it several years ago. We have more and more kids taking the AP test and still doing very, very well.
So, one of the things that I'm always so impressed with when Sue runs her, in December when we meet with the recent graduates is how sort of regardless of you bring students from a great variety of schools, and they all tell us they were well prepared for college. And that to me, it's not data, but it's soft, but it's so powerful. And I think, the students taking these types of tests and classes and the rigor and how well you all teach them how to write and think is obviously a huge, important part of that. So I just wanted to say I appreciate all that, and you can see it when the students come back and report on how they're doing.
I think we're always flattered by it and a little bit like, all right, really, should high school be harder than their college English class? But,
So-
they do great and they're well prepared.
So then my question was really, in looking at the data, it's sort of this really dense chart where it gives you on the scholars and everything, and it tells you what the average score is. But it looks to me like how do we break down in terms of number of 3s, number of 4s, and number of 5s?
I do have all that. I don't have it with me. I could probably figure that out too. So very strong. Like I said, look at the pre-calc thing, for example. In the pre-calc test, I think there were, was it 2 3s? And then all 4s and 5s, I think it was. So again, our 4s and 5s are on a higher side, but.
Right, no, that's what okay. I'd love it if you sent it along later. That'd be great.
Fine. That's what I love about this Board of Education. There's not enough data. It's 133 slides in front of you. But let's continue on. I think we're going to talk a little bit now about the next generation science standards. And I'm going to have Michael Ledoux come up in a second. I'm just going to go through the data, and I'll let him kind of explain it. But the next generation science standards have 3 dimensions: science and engineering practices, to display core ideas and cross-cutting concepts. Their 3D nature has a direct impact on the curriculum and instruction, and the assessments are in grades 5, 8, and 11, and 11 is what you're going to be hearing about. And there are 4 levels of performance: exceeding, meeting, approaching, and not met, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So basically, how have we done? We've grown every year that we've offered this. Grown from 2020, I think there was a gap of a couple of years, right, where the test actually happened. Am I correct about that? COVID. And then we've continued to grow each year. Our scaled scores are with it, and you see them growing as well. And how do we do? We're right there toward the top of the DIRG, with our scale score of 1130. But at this point, I'll have Michael come up and talk about our next steps in science.
All right, so continuing our work with the Board of Education goals, we've had continued progress with each of the courses as we've adopted the next generation science standards. So for this year's portion of the standards, we're moving along with reviewing our implementation of the chemistry revised units, and we are implementing the revised physics units. And this year we're offering our very first time offering a new elective for students, vertebrate zoology, and students are loving it so far. So I think last year I presented that we're trying to meet student needs, find what they're interested in, and this was a course that there was great interest in among students, and so this is our first year running it, and it's off to a great start. As you know, we have a brand new dome on the 3rd floor. So one of our goals as a science department is to effectively utilize the dome to enhance student learning. We actually have our very own Zach Whitlock at a week-long training this week. The department had a lot of questions about how we can better incorporate it into our curriculum, and Zach took a lot of our questions along with him to this training, and it's a very collaborative conference where he's going to come back with a lot of extra information for us. So we're excited to train more teachers on the use of the dome system in November at our PL day. And following that, we plan to incorporate the dome into assured experiences for all students at the high school. So for example, we're already having our geophysical science students use it regularly. Astronomy's been in there a lot, and our students from the downtown campus have had opportunities to spend some time in the dome as well. And lastly, we have our data from the NGSS assessment gives us some relative areas of weakness. Granted, these are still strong areas for us. We are performing quite well on the state level and across the demographic reference group. But we're using those relative weaknesses to help inform areas that we can emphasize in our district, in our PL as a department. I think that's it for me. Do you have any questions for me about science?
Good on science?
Thank you.
At this point, Dr. Kim and Holly, I think will come up and present the information for world languages. So,
Good evening, everyone. I am so excited and so pleased to present our data story in world languages for the school year 23-24. As, yes, you're going to see graphs, but behind them we all know that they represent the love, the passion that students and staff have for languages and their cultures. Right, so first I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the Seal of Biliteracy. And it's this amazing distinction that students earn their senior year from the state of Connecticut, and it's also recognized federally as well, wherein a student has to attain credit 4 years in English, and then also in one or more other languages other than English, attain a proficiency. So if we take a look at the scale of proficiency as dictated by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, we have novice, intermediate, advanced, and superior. Students need to attain at least an intermediate mid in their language of study, as well as passing those 4 years of English to attain the Seal of Biliteracy. Who's eligible? Well, it's students in grade 10, 11, or 12. Although you'll see the data reflects that the vast majority of our seniors are represented in the data. The assessment measures that we use are research-based, and they're promoted not only by our organization, as I said, the American Council of Teaching of Foreign Languages, which is akin to, for example, the Common Core in ELA and math, also the state of Connecticut. We use the APPLE in French, Mandarin, and Spanish. That is the assessment of performance towards language proficiency. We use the interpretive reading assessment in Latin, that's the ALIRA. We use the oral proficiency interview or the written proficiency test for other languages. And we also use the AP tests as promoted by the College Board. And I must say, just to highlight the success that we had in world languages with AP, do a little bragging here with the students and the staff. In all of our courses where we offer AP, students scored an average of at least 4 or better. So we're very excited about that. And we're excited about our growing student population taking, for example, AP Chinese. So we're very, very excited. So in terms of our multi-pronged approach in our action plan that I'll present in a minute, that I also presented last year, this is exactly what we were hoping to see in this year's data compared to the 22-23 school year data, wherein we saw an increase in language diversity. So last year, we had students who earned or qualified for the Seal of Biliteracy. So they earned it their senior year. They could qualify their sophomore year or junior year. And of course, Spanish, Latin, French, and Mandarin are current language offerings. And we also had it in Russian, where if you take a look at the data for the 23 and 24, we increased in 4 languages, specifically German, Hindi, Italian, and Turkish. And I was already speaking to some students this year, and we're hoping to add Finnish, Swedish, and Cantonese to that. So we are very excited about that, increase the linguistic diversity. Now, this is also exciting in that we are demonstrating here the number of sophomores, juniors, and seniors qualifying or earning the Seal of Biliteracy. And I collaborate frequently with my colleagues in comparable DIRGs and districts. And usually our numbers are 110 to 120 seniors earning the Seal of Biliteracy. We like to compare our cards, so to speak, and get a little competitive with each other. And our data story reveals that in 22-23, we had 124 out of 328 seniors, so that's about 38% of them earning the seal. And I know they're different cohorts, but this is good news for our programming and our multi-pronged approach, in that in 23-24, we had 127 out of 311 students, or 41%, earning the Seal of Biliteracy. So we had that slight percentage point increase, which in strategizing, applying, and really looking at our action plan, this is exactly what we were hoping for. So in terms of our next steps or our action plan, we want to make sure that we're staying research-based, and especially when we're assessing language proficiency of students, we want to ensure their accurate placement in courses, because we want to make sure that our students stay with their languages of study as long as possible. We do see a drop-off later on in their senior year, and we did survey them last year and saw the major barrier there was usually scheduling. Where the language sometimes had to give in terms of other courses when compared to other courses. But we continue to work with the school counseling office and the main office to make sure that, for example, when I work with Mr. Gallo, to make sure that our offerings are, we want to make sure that we're providing access points for our students. And we saw, particularly in the data that I just presented, if students are appropriately challenged, they progress towards the Seal of Biliteracy and they stay with the language. Also, due to the increase in languages, we're really looking to develop relationships with our students, both in our classes and outside of our classes, so we can identify those students who speak languages at home that are less commonly taught language opportunities that maybe we might not offer here. And due to our increase in language diversity, as you just saw, we're doing our best. We're strengthening our relationship with school counselors so they have those conversations with the students, whether they're in a world language class or not, for example. In terms of professional development, we continue to promote our staff going to, for example, next coming Thursday, they're going to the CT Cult Conference, which is a conference for us in New Haven. And we actually have our elementary team presenting there. So we could brag a little bit about our K-5 Spanish program, which is awesome. And in addition to other offerings that we have to learn about at CT Cult. And we also, in the past, we've been to the ACTFL conference, and we try to stay current with language acquisition research, align our instruction with the Seal of Biliteracy requirements. We have a continued collaboration with the state as well. We have representation in the committee to redesign the Connecticut World Language Standards. And we're integrating the new ACTFL guidelines to take a look at our rubrics for our performance tasks to make sure that they're accurate in measuring student proficiency. Moving on to continued curriculum development and revision. We continue to align and overtly assess the ACTFL standards in the curriculum because that's how we get the end result of students attaining the Seal of Biliteracy. Thanks to in large part to the investment we've made in our language lab, we have additional stations, we have brand new computers, and that's a great space because that's also what the environment, so to speak, to test for the Seal of Biliteracy. And we could leverage it so that students continue acquiring language skills and intercultural concepts, competence in real-world contexts that we control within the language lab, but we also do a great job in our classrooms too. Definitely continue utilizing our understanding by design framework to implement those performance task assessments. They're the assessments where we regularly test those skills to make sure, are we on our way to getting our students to attaining that proficiency? We definitely make sure to continue with data tracking and reporting. We have a comprehensive database that usually makes Paul Gallo dizzy whenever I share it with him. But it's very important that we continue to track our student progress towards them earning the Seal of Biliteracy. And we regularly share that database at the end of the year with the state to ensure that we're also staying competitive with our numbers, we're increasing access points to our students, and we're comparable to the other districts that are comparable to us. We continue to regularly report our progress to students, families, and staff, and the state to ensure transparency and accountability so that our program is leading the students to that end result, whether it's through our performance tasks, through Power School, through conferences. We make sure that students also have that language to say, oh, I'm at a novice mid, so what am I supposed to do to get to that novice high in the language, to really empower them through goal setting as well. Recognition and celebration. In addition to when students earn the Seal of Biliteracy, they get a gold seal on their diploma. We've started to identify it as well on their transcripts, so it gives them a little boost. They can have it as early as their sophomore year if they earned it that year. We make sure that we have it on there. So they can communicate that to post-secondary institutions. We make sure to highlight it in letters of recommendations, our school website, and we also, I don't know if you saw this last year, but we had little pins for our students as well at their graduation walk. In terms of feedback and evaluation, we continue to seek feedback from numerous stakeholders to basically improve our programming. And something that's been very exciting is we've been partnering with surrounding districts so they could come and view our program and any language program. The most recent was when Wilton came to visit us to look at our K-5 program, and we got great feedback from them. And we're hoping to continue that reciprocity as well to strengthen our programs. and our relationships. Continue periodic world language program evaluations to assess their effectiveness in optimally impacting student achievement, performance, and proficiency. Those are the 3 main data points that we use to make sure that our students are on their way to earning the seal of biliteracy. And that is that. Thank you. Any questions about world language programming? Great. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Up next, I'm going to invite Mr. Zambrano to talk about career and technical education. I do want to say one thing, like, all of us sometimes write down notes and have our notes in front of us and all that, and I have to be honest, I was mesmerized by Dr. Holly's notes. So just hold up your notepad, will you? I don't know how anybody could read that, but she's got these notes in this little book like this. That's fantastic. Mr. Zambrano.
My notes are a little larger than that. All right. So what's next for us? How do we stay current with career and technical education? We have several staff members who are, one, Rachel Martinich is an AP scorer. Kelly Zilli is the state rep for Family Consumer Science, specifically around TSOs, which are the technology student organizations. I am a member of the new state standards for tech ed, part of CLC. So with all that in mind, as we update and write new curriculums, that's how we're staying current. So how do we expand enrollment? Always looking to improve our course offerings. I think over the last 10 years, we've had probably that many new courses added. Some of them, all of the computer science courses offered over the last 10 years, all new. 3D animation, web design, game design, just name a few. This year specifically, because of a new state standard, we updated a personal finance course called Business Principles and Financial Literacy. And then Project Lead the Way is always updating its curriculum, our UConn courses for Family Consumer Science, and then the AP courses. So co-curricular programs. I like to think of engineering, TV broadcasting, yearbook, Rams Cafe, journalism, right? So each of these areas, it's not a specific study, right? So if you look at engineering, you know, I'll have a group of 25, and within the team, we break into groups. There'll be a presenter, there'll be a researcher, there'll be someone who enjoys design, right? So within each of those areas, you could look at TV broadcasting the same way. You have some technical kids that love the technology, other kids that like to be in front of the camera, right? So in each of those areas, we allow kids to explore their interests. We also have many after-school clubs, and we are advisors for many independent studies as well. So I'm smiling with the after-school clubs because I think my department hosts about 20 alone. And the last step. So this year, there is money set aside for the innovation team to basically review all the CTE areas as far as the spaces that we're currently using and how to modernize or innovate those spaces. We are also privy to the Perkins Grant, where we have money that we also use and utilize to stay current. And as I like to say, CTE, we bring learning to life. So we take all those core courses and we kind of apply them. Again, if you go back to some of the courses I offered or spoke about, journalism is another one. Again, researchers, interviewers, writers. So they're applying things that they may have learned somewhere else to produce a product. Questions? Yeah.
So when you think about some of these clubs, right? For example, and I think we spoke about this earlier this year, you know, Girls That Code, and sort of think about coding, right? And the importance of learning basically another language that's vital, you know, sort of for the future and for the success for these kids. Relying on them to self-select seems, I gotta be polite about this, it seems like it's not the best we're not doing a great service for these kids, right? So for example, girls that code, that's great, but I'm assuming that there aren't many that are exposed to coding. And so those that do code enjoy it, and so they'll self-select and sort of take those courses. How do we get more exposure to more kids? I mean, is it, we talked about resources, I think, sort of having teachers or someone to teach those courses or to sponsor those clubs. But I mean, is there a plan in place to roll this out more broadly to students, given how imperative it is for the workforce of the 21st century?
So, the latest one was the business course that the state kind of mandated, right? So there's no mandate currently for that. If we did and you wanted every kid to have it, I believe it's 3 teachers you'd need to cover that. So it
When
is
you say every kid, is that every kid in the school or
That's
within
every
one
kid in the
grade?
school.
So if you were to say, okay, by 11th grade or whatever, everyone needs to take or by graduation,
Right.
take at least one class. And so it doesn't have to be one class per year, but over
Let's
the
say
course
it's
of your high
intro
school
to
career.
computer science, just
Yeah, perfect.
for example.
So you think that would require 3 teachers, or if you stagger it, how many teachers would that require?
We did this number for the business course, and I think it was,
It's probably 2.
2?
But that being said, there's also, what do you give up, right? What's the opportunity cost? If you bring something in, does something squeeze out of that when you put a mandate in? So it's just something to consider, right? You can do anything, but there's always a cost that comes with that.
And would the cost be, would it be a free period? I mean,
No.
or do you think it would be something,
If there's a
because there are
minimum-
plenty of free periods, right? I mean,
Well, it depends on the person.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the student. You need to get 25 credits. So the key is getting into the 25 credits. If you change the way you did stuff, but there would be a cost to that if you added teachers and did things like that as well. But if you kept our credits at the same level and put in a mandate for something, right? Something else you can squeeze out. That's all. You just don't know necessarily what that is.
perfect.
and we've done that to ourselves in my department where we've had so many offerings. Instead of getting full sections with 25, we get 6, 8 kids. We realized we need to limit the amount of offerings, right? Because if you add something new, you take away from something else, that's the point.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, just to follow up on Matt, I mean, you don't want to give up those other classes that the other students are taking, but, I mean, I have my older son got his PhD in political science, and he's now a data scientist, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So, are we embedding some of the data scientists or analytical tools or computer programming tools into other program areas, as well as, CTE, to give kids just a little bit of exposure to that way of thinking?
So Michelle could answer this better, but there are graduation standards for technology, right? And so they're getting some of that there.
It's also part of the portfolio that the students are working on is really they have a whole element that really, we're thinking about design thinking, we're thinking about innovation. We have an expanded makerspace every year, like literally every year, where kids have opportunities to explore their own passions in their own time and also with whole classes. So it's getting embedded throughout the curriculum for kids to have opportunities. And this last year, we introduced the workshop, which introduces 3D printing and coding and trying to figure out design and trying to add all of that to their curriculum without having to really take away. Like, this is a way for us to offer the opportunity without taking something off of their plate. And the engagement we're having in those spaces for not just the students, but the teachers are all really excited about including that in their offerings and expanding their own repertoire of formative assessments and trying to get kids to think really differently about things that used to be sort of pen and paper and reading and text. And that exposure is really helping with engagement, keeping the kids really focused on the big picture learning that's happening in the class, in the important classroom.
Thank you.
Up next, Mr. Remley in English.
All right, good evening. So, we are going to talk about grammar. Who's excited? know I am. All right, so our scores have kind of remained pretty consistent right around the 600 level, and the number of students earning what is considered state benchmark, which is a 480 in evidence-based reading and writing, was basically historically, I was within historical parameters, so about 89%. We vacillate, but sometimes between 88% up to 92. So that's like a pretty good number. Now, students go on and oftentimes retake. If they don't make that 480 benchmark, they'll take it in a subsequent retaking. So we usually get around 97% of our entire student body. And then those that don't make state benchmark, there's in-house ways that they can actually make that standard to go on to graduate. But worth noting too, and Principal Egan already talked about this, but we had 178 students take the AP language exam as juniors last year. That's nearly 60% of the junior class. And of that, 91% earned a 3 or better. We kind of thought the scores might dip just because we're offering the course to more students. It's a difficult test, it's a difficult class, but we were pretty excited about the outcome. So kind of triangulating that over to the SAT data was sort of interesting, and I'll talk about that in a second. I know you guys are excited to talk about grammar, because I am. So the SAT, the College Board, I should say, changed the way they broke down subscores for us, and actually led to some interesting insights. So achievement is broken down into these 4 subcategories. We've got information ideas, craft and structure, expression of ideas, and yes, the one I want to talk about, standard English conventions. So the way they used to break these scores down, they changed the names. It used to be words in context and command of evidence. I won't bore you with too many of the details, unless you guys want to talk about it. Okay. So it's they were a 1 through 15 composite subscore, right? So it was always difficult. They kind of gave you a rough idea about where that went in terms of goal, but then they would spit out at the end of it using all their different psychometrics like, hey, this is where you land, right? So we always knew standard English conventions were like a relative weakness. Our students usually scored in all the other subscores an 11 overall composite score. Standard English conventions was a 10. But I didn't know how that actually went to what does that mean? So then looked at it another way, they now change it to bands. So they give you an idea how items coded as like a grammar question, if you will, how that student did in an overall composite score. So 420 to 480. So right at or below goal. So measured that way, we had a large number of students, nearly 30%, kind of at that below goal. Now you're probably thinking, well, those might be kids that are struggling, because I was wondering, with more kids taking the AP Lang test, wouldn't scores go up because they're such similar tests? But there's a key difference in the test. That test does not measure standard English conventions. It has writing, but any on-demand piece, they don't deduct for grammatical errors, because it's on demand. And can you imagine, if your English teacher is leaning over your shoulder as you're writing furiously and nope, that's the wrong comma, nope, that's in a positive, that's a reflexive pronoun, don't do that. So the way we've always measured it is through revised writing, and that's the way we've assessed it, right? But with kind of the advent of AI technologies and Grammarly, it's a lot easier for that to kind of get lost. So it was an interesting insight, and we were even wondering, were students that were doing well struggling on those questions? And some were doing really well, but a relative weakness for them. So kind of going back to maybe there's some ways to help students in a way that's not overly disruptive. I'm not saying, I know everyone's bust out the grammar primers, let's get to it. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I think there's maybe some, for lack of a better word, some money on the table that we could do that would help out. So I'll talk about that in a second. I'll talk about what we were doing last year. We have interim assessments where we monitor reading, and really our goal is to try and get all of our students to state benchmark. So we have interim assessment that measure kind of core reading skills in fiction and nonfiction. So we're going to continue to use those, and we have ways of capturing students, kind of identifying them and supporting them through our reading center and our writing center. So the goals for this year, kind of knowing this. So the first thing is I've been working with the teacher leaders in the Writing Center, both whom are really well versed in kind of SAT, I call them SAT grammarians, if you will. So what we think would be a good first step is to kind of do push-in instruction to kind of target with some targeted lessons with grammar instruction. I spent a little time reviewing items. I don't want to say they're overly esoteric, but they can be a little tricky, especially if you've been relying on revised writing. And I mean, how do I put this way? If I asked everyone here what a reflexive pronoun, how many people could definitively tell me what it was, right? It's a little tricky. So we're gonna try and brush them up a little bit on some of those things. The idea to do that this year, ideally kind of over the winter into the early spring before the SAT school day. So that's step one. The other one is we want to use PSAT data. We've implemented this for this year. Any other internal diagnostics. If a student had one bad test, I don't want to necessarily make them feel like they're captured and being put in a support class. But we want to continue. Last year we were trying to do this after the schedule had been published because we just done the PSAT for the first time, but we have the PSAT data this year. So we're actually placing these kids in this interdisciplinary reading support class to try and help them prepare for PSAT or SAT. And then the last thing is we're changing a little bit one of our, kind of going back to one of our writing assessments, which we have 9th and 10th grade kind of like summative portfolios. We're changing the way that we're going to do the kind of the reflective piece there. And the idea is to kind of zero in on more writing specific skills and some grammar pieces. So I kind of want to frame it all like grammar is the hardest needle to move. It's probably everyone's least favorite part of English. So we don't want to, I'm cautious to like overcorrect, but I'm hopeful some small adjustments could yield some positive results for us. So any questions about that? Reflexive pronoun, anyone want to know? No.
Quick question. So you mentioned the PSAT data. I think that's interesting. I mean, how do you've seen obviously the SAT English data. Any conclusions we can draw from the PSAT data that you've received in English and versus SAT? For
the SAT data, so I mean they're pretty consistent, kind of going across. Like, was there growth? Yes, but it's weird. Kind of going back to the question you were sort of asking, I think earlier about like the context of the test. It's tricky because there were times where students' scores surprised me, and I don't want to get too granular, and I don't know if they just had a bad day or they just weren't super motivated. In some of that, I mean, the context in which you take a test, like I think to use the AP Lang test, the students had a lot of skin in the game. They really cared and they were studying, they were doing well. And I think the results sort of, that bared out. For the PSAT and SAT data, I think the PSAT we're still learning, getting used to, but there wasn't anything that overly surprised me. Did it help students in the SAT? I think preparing for the SAT, I think it did, but it also was the first year. So I'm not sure I'm ready to kind of like hitch my wagon to that star.
Okay, thanks.
Right, thanks.
Up next, Michelle Lula is going to come up and present the information ICT next steps. Also, I want to thank Michelle. This presentation looks amazing every year. She kind of tweaks it every year and enhances it, but a special thank you to her for she really helped put this presentation together. So, Michelle, come on up. Golf claps.
Well, now I've already made notes. I have to add something about innovation, design thinking, and the makerspace for next year. So I just wanted to first of all, thank you for hearing what the library program has to offer in terms of how it informs this presentation. There are a few things that we do that are really helping the kids to develop their critical thinking. So one is we really do integrate instruction that fosters critical thinking and applying that information across disciplines. So that's one thing we do. We co-teach across disciplines also, and we offer really personalized feedback to students at research checkpoints. So when they're doing the inquiry process, we check in with them over and over and over again. And we really we have learned through our own collected data, which is the next bullet point, so I'll talk about that, through pre and post assessment, that informs our future planning for instruction. So we do find that the feedback and the pre and post really inform our instruction, our ability to collaborate effectively with our colleagues. We design instruction that challenges kids to think about to make meaning out of data. And obviously the whole makerspace thing, which I clearly missed. And then we embed digital literacy into the core content areas and also into the health education. This week, we're on a 2-week marathon with the health classes, just doing digital citizenship for 2 weeks straight. And finally, we provide a range of materials that really supports evidence-based reading across disciplines in both print and digital formats. And next up is
Becky Poppy will be coming up for math.
Hi, everyone. So a lot of our goals for this year are really extensions of things that we were working on last year. I mean, some of this work is very thoughtful. We want to be really thorough with what we're doing, so some of this may be familiar. We've been updating our curriculum for the last couple years. The bulk of the first stage of that curriculum document is done, and I left this up here because it is ongoing work, and we are going back to assess, did we miss anything? Do we need to expand anything or detail anything or highlight something or change this? Does this make sense somewhere else? So that work is still continuing, even though much of that work has already been completed. We are, again, looking at the redundancies and focusing on that vertical and horizontal alignment. We do offer a lot of different levels of courses, so we just want to make sure that students have the opportunity to move from maybe a college prep level, Algebra 2, into an honors level pre-calc, if that's like a path. Sometimes interests and things, sparks, come to play later on in high school. Maybe they started out in a grade level Algebra 1, and then by junior year, they're like, you know what, I'm going pre-med. So then they need to start focusing on some of those STEM courses. So we just want to make sure students have those opportunities. Much of our work this year, while we are still looking back at the content of the curriculum, is focused on assessment. So whether that encompasses alignment between courses to make sure, again, our tests are really following the curriculum, connection to the standardized test, so that's some of our SAT prep. I do think we have found students have more questions about the SATs, which anecdotally would probably lead me to believe that they're not getting as much test prep outside. I do think when they take the PSAT, some of the questions about just the format of the test are new, even like the types of questions and things they'll be asked. So just making sure that content is now purposefully embedded, whereas before it was, like pre-COVID, I would say it was probably more of a nice to do thing because they were receiving that support somewhere else. And I, again, anecdotally feel like they do have more questions in the class. So just making sure they're having opportunities to practice the SAT questions, which align to some of the higher order thinking. The questions are kind of in the format of easy, medium, and hard, so ensuring that they do have access to those harder questions to get more of those points later on. So opportunities to work with advanced content there. We do try and do formative assessments more thoroughly, which again gives kids more feedback as they're progressing through a unit, so we're not waiting until that assessment to just see how they're doing. We are also expanding the supports we offer to students. So I think the block has really offered us the opportunity to work more with individual students within the course. We're also fortunate enough this year to be able to offer Math Center support. We have an intern who's going to be doing his student teaching in the second semester, but for the first semester, part of his time is actually spent directly helping students. So it's open to any students for certain periods throughout the day, and students have walked in to ask for help. A lot of it so far this year has been surrounding test prep and maybe missed content. I have a question on homework, number 5 type of a thing, but students are making use of the opportunity. And then we'll continue to monitor our mastery-based diploma for our graduation portfolio. So some of that language changed from last year, and just embedding those assured experiences for all students as they progress through our math program. And then again, the PSATs, as Evan said, it's still kind of a new idea. I think our 10th and 11th graders go into it, particularly our 10th graders saying they've never taken this test before. So while it is a relevant data point, I think there's also some nuances there of just getting used to like the format of the test and the timing and the types of questions. There is a lot of language even in the math questions, so just getting used to how they might be asking a question helps them prepare for the actual SAT. So the math department's using some of that language in our everyday instruction, problem sets, on assessments as well. So, questions for math?
Hi, given the SAT score drop in math from last year to this year, it sounds like some of it might be just familiarity with how the questions are phrased and whatnot. I'm just wondering, are there other things that you think might be a factor, or other things that you're looking at in terms of how to address that gap?
So it's interesting because we broke it down by course, and it was almost like across the board, like even in multivariable calculus, like those students' scores dropped. So I do wonder if, and there were still students in that course that scored 800 on the math, so like the content is still there. I do wonder what their motivation might be. Like there's, the AP scores are high. Are they relying more on that than the SAT? I think we had the digital format for the first time last year, which I think was kind of interesting for some students, especially like maybe a struggling learner who has to read a screen, read a problem, then do the work on paper, then transfer that knowledge back to the screen. I think some of that might be challenging for a certain population of student. With the paper test, you can kind of measure and look at the graphs differently. I don't know that they had that same opportunity on a laptop. So I think some of our programs that we use in our instructional models offer students that like kind of computer time on purpose to get them used to the idea that they have to read the information off of the screen.
I think it's important to note too, there was a statewide drop in math scores, and then across the DIRG as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I want to be number one in everything every year, so to be clear. And we were number one last year and we dipped to 4, but there was a statewide drop as well with math.
Yeah. I was actually wondering that. Have you had any conversations with other districts in our DIRG to understand then their drops and, if there's something that's going on that's beyond our cohort?
I personally have not had other, there's usually regional math conferences and we haven't, like that hasn't happened yet, so.
One other question. So given sort of the cumulative nature of math education, right? If you were to look back and say, can you identify what a common deficiency is among our students in math? I mean, this maybe go back to elementary school or middle school. I mean, what do you identify as sort of being a weak point as we look across maybe the PSATs or the SATs or even among the assessments that are taken throughout college, throughout high school, excuse me?
I think first it's hard to look. Like every cohort is a little bit different, especially with COVID, like everybody's got a little bit of nuance here and there. Broad strokes, I would say that our probability strand and data analysis historically has been a little bit lower on the SAT because that's usually the unit that gets taught last in the school year, so that's the one that often got dropped. We did see a boost a couple years ago. Our Algebra 2, our college prep level Algebra 2 course moved their data analysis and probabilities unit to right before the SAT. So we did see a jump in those numbers for that population of student.
That's very interesting, yeah.
I would also say that we've noticed back in 3rd grade, and we've done a lot of work about this, and I'm very excited to report out on October 21st. I promise I won't be as long as Bill. I'll be concise and to the point, but fractions is huge. And the understanding of fractions starting in 3rd grade and building upon fractions is really at the heart of what these kids have to mathematically be able to do as you think about Algebra 2, and moving into that higher level. So how we go about teaching fractions and how we go about teaching 3rd grade teachers to teach fractions and 4th grade teachers to teach fractions, and how we're teaching people that are not math content experts to teach math is really important. So certainly when you hit 7th grade, you have math people that have gotten their certification to teach math. And when you're teaching K-6, you might have a few teachers who are certified to teach math in 6th grade, but it's rare. And so how we go about teaching our teachers to teach students to have a deep understanding of some of that higher order math is really important, because oftentimes teachers will go back to, this is how I learned math and this is how I'm teaching math. And that's not necessarily the best way to teach math. And so it is really been a lot of professional learning that we've been doing with that population of kids. And so we're really our population of teachers, in hopes that they will provide better instruction, which will also help to improve the mathematics 3 through 8, because it does build what our students do on that smarter balance and what they do moving on NWEA. There's lots of targets that we have with adaptive testing and how students perform and how we track it and how we use it and how we help our students and our teachers to improve in that area is really critical.
So fractions and then data and probability, those are,
The amount of high school
related.
students that are afraid of fractions is frightening. So thank you, Dr. Carenti, for. Yeah.
Thank you.
Up next, Mr. Forcucci will be talking about next steps in social studies.
Good evening, Mike Forcucci, Social Studies Department. Briefly going to talk about two things, our internal assessments, kind of how we approach them, how we use them to inform our teaching, and also our external assessments, which is primarily the AP scores and advanced classes that we offer. Regarding our common formative assessments, what we kind of call benchmarks, last year I spoke about how we've kind of rejuvenated our approach and tried to provide teachers with more comprehensive real-time data that they can use in their lesson planning. So we piloted a new assessment type, which is modeled more off the reading for information, evidence-based reading. And it really assesses students' reading comprehension and what we call their historical thinking skills, but really could also be called critical thinking skills. Their ability to take new information, make sense of it, and then apply it across different sources, different mediums, etc. We piloted this approach last year with our sophomores. Teachers were largely supportive, found the information useful for both their lesson planning and also their own kind of calibration, both across the grade level and vertically, which I'll talk about. So over the course of last year, we created pre-assessments and post-assessments for each of our core classes, freshman through senior year. And this is the first year we're working to implement them all. And we've gone through our pre-assessments this year to start, and it's been successful. So hopefully it's something we can continue on. As far as the actual data, let me see if there we go. As far as the actual data, we've set up the assessments to be formatted all the same. So they start with a secondary source at grade level, and they ask, again, reading comprehension questions, but also questions which are, similar to what they're going to see on the SAT, similar to what they're going to see on AP tests moving forward. Also with various different sources. So like I said, we start with a secondary source, then we've got two primary source excerpts, which are kind of aligned with the themes and major argument of whatever that initial source is. Our third source is a non-textual source, charts, political cartoons, graphs, flow charts, different ways of presenting similar information. And then the last question set are what we call synthesis questions, questions which ask them to identify themes throughout the various sources that they've seen. This then gets scored immediately by Schoology, which is our curriculum delivery program, I'm not sure. Schoology offers some great resources so that we can have it scored immediately and the data can be accessible to teachers right away. That data can then be used to revise curriculum, to tweak lesson plans, to maybe shift focus in a particular unit to address potential areas of need, potential areas of growth and development. And like I mentioned, this is also really helpful for teachers to see if what they're doing is consistent with what other teachers are doing across the grade level and also from grade to grade. So a teacher can find how their students did the previous year and make sure that the way that they're assessing is consistent and equitable. Yeah, and so as I mentioned, those have been successful and we've expanded those to all our grade levels and we're hoping to see some success from that. Just real briefly, what does this data look like? We of course have individual student data and we can see how they do on each question set, but we also get grade level data so we can see trends across the grade level. And if you kind of look left to right, you'll see the source type from which the questions deal with, how those questions align with the Connecticut Social Studies standards, how they align with the AP skills that our various AP sections offer, and then how students did across the board. And of course, when we made these assessments, there's particular questions which are more attuned to the grade level, some, that are more kind of at that AP level, so we can see how students are doing across the board. It's helpful also in that these assessments don't affect student GPA. It doesn't come with all sorts of stress which might impact them one way or the other. Hopefully, as we get more consistent with this, students will become more comfortable, not only with taking these type of assessments, but the question types in them, and even the digital approach, which is where all the AP classes and the SAT is going. I should mention, this is our pre-assessment for this year for our sophomores. So this is where right. This is where they start, and our hope is by the post-assessment that we'll move them all up to that meets the goal level and potentially higher. How is this all bearing out? This is our number of advanced course offerings. I know Bill has already kind of spoken to it, but we've seen a pretty significant increase just in the sections of advanced courses that we're offering. We had 29 last year, 28 the year before, and we're up to 38 sections of advanced classes this year. So enrollment is growing, which is a great sign, and as my fellow department chairs have mentioned, with growth in enrollment, scores could be a concern, but we're still seeing pretty impressive increases in scores. This is our sophomore level class, our AP World class. And we've been looking at these pretty intently because of the switch we made with our freshman course to a heterogeneous one, which Bill had mentioned earlier. And the previous department chair, Bob Stevenson, had argued that this would open up opportunities across the board for more students to have access to AP courses and excel in those fields. And I believe 2020 was the first year, and our sophomore numbers have bared out those results, and they continue to. I was nervous last year when we hit 53 sophomores hitting a 5, 37 hitting a 4, that, maybe we had peaked, but somehow we are continuing to see increases. So that's great news. And we're hopeful that that will continue to bear out in future grades, because now we have this many kids with that experience taking AP tests and doing well on them. And hopefully they can carry that confidence on to their senior year.
Penny, that's one subset of the question you asked me earlier.
Yeah.
That's all I've got, if you have questions.
This is one of my favorite nights, if you all couldn't tell. But I was just wondering, we've talked a lot about the differences between our female and male students on the SATs. Do we see any differences in their AP performance? Have we tracked that? Or is that?
I would say we probably see difference in the courses that they take. And this is, I don't know that this is a hard trend, but generally our AP Psych tends to be more female centered, whereas, our government classes, I would say economics, but that is becoming quite popular across the board. So I don't know if we have, anything that you could really draw strong conclusions from.
You could do the same thing curricular-wise in different elective areas and things like that as well across the building. But, family consumer science, you might see more women. In different areas, you might see more men. But ultimately, not necessarily but I have not tracked it. It's really a question.
Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Kevin Ryan, and I don't want to say last but not least, but he always asks to go last and talk about our next steps in special education.
Thanks, Bill. I never asked to go last in college. I always wanted to go first because I didn't want to compare myself to anybody else. And as you can tell, because you've been sitting here all night listening to these people, they're tough acts to follow. So I'm glad to be among them. However, not always happy to be last. But it is appropriate for me to be last, in truth, because, and I say this every year, when I do this, because everything that you've heard tonight, all of the information, all of the data, all the strengths, all of the challenges that we face include special education students, right? They're all included in every number that you see and read here tonight. I think that what is most fundamental, it's a core value of mine, and again, if you were here last year and you heard me say this, you're going to hear me again next year, I'm going to say it again. My core value and core belief has always been that we need to provide and open up opportunities for kids. I think you've heard over and over from Bill's opening until, Mike just talking about AP courses at the social studies level. We have an obligation to provide opportunities for students of all abilities, right? Students with IEPs to have access to general ed curriculum in general, but more than that, higher level work as well. And so I think that we all as a community should be really proud. In my former job, I worked with lots of districts like ours in this DIRG, and I would say we have much more latitude in terms of who we allow, for want of a better way to say that, and how much we promote students with special education IEPs to take high-level classes. So not just more students in general education classes at any level, but we have a significant number of students with IEPs who are taking high-level classes and achieving really well. We have a strong special education program. Obviously, we have special education teachers who, through our learning centers, some might call them a resource room, who have the ability to really work with and support students in all of this important work that they're doing, either at some point pushing into a classroom, collaborating with a teacher, or having kids come to them in their own classrooms and work. I just think that there's a demonstrated commitment on the part of certainly the high school faculty, but across the district and certainly here among the board members, right, to make sure that we have access, our kids have access to these classes. One of the things that we always want to do, and we will always do, is we want to, continue to collaborate special education teachers. And by that, I really mean the whole broad range of special services, right? Occupational therapists, physical therapists, teacher of the hearing impaired, assistive technology specialists, social workers, psychologists. All of those people are collaborating with gen ed teachers on a daily basis. It's not just a special ed teacher and a gen ed teacher that are collaborating. I say here on the slide, that we want to collaborate around differentiation. And differentiation it's a word that, I don't know, it's been around for such a long time now that I think sometimes people roll their eyes when they hear it or read it. But I think it's really important that we keep talking about it, right? Because it's really important. And what I've seen over the course of time, not just here, but in my entire career, is that what 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we thought was like true, really innovative differentiation has just become part of teacher practice now. And so when I sit in PPT meetings and when I look at IEPs and I look at accommodations that we're making for students with IEPs in gen ed classes, I think to myself, well, we really don't need to check that box. We'll check it because the law says we have to, but that's just part of what good teaching has become over time. That being said, teaching is an art as well as a science, and we know that there are new and innovative ways to teach, and so our teachers stay current with those things along with gen ed teachers, and they collaborate to make sure that the curriculum and that the work is accessible to our kids and that our kids are being supported appropriately. The other thing that I would say that we do really well, and is we integrate all of those people that I just said before actually into the classrooms. We actually have our assistive tech people who are pushing into classrooms, who are working with students, who are training teachers. Jill talked about training teachers in third grade to teach third grade math. We have our assistive technology specialists, our occupational therapists, who are actually pushing into some classes to work with kids in classes and teachers. And of course, we have our speech and language pathologists doing the same thing, as well as special education teachers. So I think that that's an important way that we're collaborating. Last and What I would say is that, we want to always monitor our special education classes. We do have special ed math classes, social studies classes, English classes. For those kids for whom the gen ed curriculum is just, they're not quite there yet. Our goal is always to move students out of special education classes directly taught by special education teachers into general education. I would say that we're really quite successful in that regard. But we do have special ed classes in there. We want to make sure that those classes are aligned with Connecticut standards, right? We want to make sure that we are aligned with the high school curriculum as well. We may not go into the same depth. We may not work at the same speed or the same pace. In an English class, for example, we may not read the same number of novels, but we try to stay aligned with reading the novels that they are. We may read 2 throughout the school year instead of 4, for example. Some of the supplementary materials that we use, for reading for information, it may be a bit modified, but nonetheless, we really work hard to try to align those classes so that kids can make that jump, right? From a special ed English class as a freshman or a sophomore into, a gen ed class. So that's always our goal. Make sure that we build the base for students so that all these wonderful opportunities that you had, the opportunity to sit and listen to tonight are accessible to special ed kids.
Thank you very much. Questions? Awesome. Thanks again.
I'll just end with this. You have a question? Sure, go ahead.
So I just wanted to ask, first of all, amazing presentation tonight. I share Penny's views. This is one of my favorite meetings. Just the work that's going on at the high school is absolutely phenomenal. So you all should be proud.
I do find it somewhat terrifying, but go ahead.
So my question was really around the block schedule and change in start times and how that's impacted both teaching, and have we transitioned all of our classes and teachers to teach in the block, and do we feel like we're kind of past that transition? And then how have you felt like the overall schedule, including start times, have impacted kids and teachers?
I think the changes we made years ago were only to kids' benefits for their well-being. I think start time helps with their well-being. I think one of the best things we did was the rotating schedule of the block, that it fully rotates all the way through. So everybody gets a sleep in, everybody gets to leave early. As far as transitioning to the block, it did take a couple of years to transition the curriculum. They're still working out. I shouldn't say that. We're fully transitioned into the block, but I think they're, as you heard them say, they're always working on the curriculum, trying to make modifications and adjustments where needed. So that's a never-ending process. But I would say at this point, yes, we're fully into the block at this point.
So just to follow up, do kids in the block have more flexibility to go and do things that they might not otherwise have been able to do, whether it's an extra elective, or is it easier for us to offer more? It seems like we're offering a lot more, and there are only so many hours in the day.
We do offer a lot, and it is slightly easier. There's always some things that will constrain us, right? So if you have, say we have the science mini, which is essential for us to be able to do that, that might create a constraint on being able to take a full course during that elective, during that period. But we try and align that with our PEs and health to try and give students opportunities so they can utilize their frees that they might have and not necessarily have tons of frees. So there are more opportunities because of the block, but it also creates greater opportunities for teachers to dialogue and collaborate with each other as well during the course of the day. The professional learning time is enhanced. It gives them more flexibility, more time to be able to work with each other.
Great. Anybody else? Thank you so much. Yeah.
So, Bill, just one question as far as, there's been some comments about the recent behavior at some sporting events. And I know you sent out an email today, and we think about sort of the environment for students and for all students to feel safe and sort of to thrive. I mean, what sort of steps, I think, do you think can we take, or to correct that? I mean, I don't know. There's always been sort of a risk of breathalyzing and things like that at some of these sporting events. I don't know how often it actually occurs, but sort of what steps can we take to make sure that the students are sort of behaving as they should on campus, and that we create a safe environment for the students to learn and to enjoy extracurricular activities as well.
While this isn't the assessment presentation, I'd be glad to talk about it. Certainly, I think student behavior is a collective responsibility between the schools and the families. And ultimately, we will try and create safe environments for students to come and be able to have an opportunity to participate, hopefully safely, while they come to an event. Our hope is that students, in combination with their families, have productive conversations about what that looks like. You know, I will never get into a public conversation about individual things that kids might be doing, but certainly we want to make sure that our students don't do things that are, quite frankly, illegal, and they shouldn't do at a high school. A part of that conversation, again, I think is you know, the partnership we have with families, that we've got to work together on that. You know, part of our responsibility is to, when kids make mistakes, help them learn from it. You know, it is part of the adolescent development that kids will make some mistakes. And when they do, we have to discipline them and offer them an opportunity to do better and learn from it. I don't want to see any student ever make a mistake. You know, ideally, they never would. But I'd rather them learn from them in high school than learn from them later on in life. So,
For sure.
you know, while I'd be glad to have any
thank you.
conversations
Good.
about any of that, I do think it's a collective responsibility.
I'd just like to add to that. I know that we talked briefly about it, and I think that we haven't had a discussion as a board, because you did send out that email today, which I really appreciated. Thank you for sending that to the high school community. I know that this year, Principal Gussich did a presentation about expectations of student behavior at the middle school, and I don't recall seeing an email like that to the high school students. So did something like that. Do we do something like that in high school, or is that something we've done in the past, or you would consider doing in the future?
We do have meetings, grade level meetings, several times throughout the year with kids, where we talk about expectations and review what we expect from them. I generally did not send home the presentation, but we do talk about expectations with kids on the regular. To be honest, there's several times a year we have grade level meetings with our kids.
That'd be great. I guess I just think as the board, it is, I wasn't at the football game this Saturday. I was at the one previous, and I left early with my middle schooler. And I think that it's important that any school event is a family-friendly event, and I didn't quite feel that that was the case of our high school students.
Certainly, there's a lot of conversations around all of that. You know, we do have, we want our kids to be able to come to events and be able to come and do that in a safe environment. That includes middle school kids, and we're maybe the only district still at this point that doesn't require the parents come with middle school kids to games. There are many students who are unchaperoned, and that's one of the reasons I talk about it. It's a collective responsibility, right? And certainly we're there. We always have myself, assistant principals who are at games, the athletic director, all that, and they're well-staffed with police, as we do try and keep kids safe. And again, I would hope kids make choices that always make themselves, their families, their communities, and their school proud. That's what I hope. And to be quite honest with you, I would say the great majority do. Even if you see an event where maybe something shouldn't happen, again, I hate to see it in a public forum, the majority of kids are still making good choices. It's not everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you very much. You guys can all.
No other topics? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Honestly, it's an honor.
All right, moving on. Once again, comments from the public. And then announcements and future business for Dr. Lutzy.
Sure. Just two quick announcements. Today at Saks, we rolled out our phone-free schools initiative. So day one, we actually began the initiative at the very beginning of the school year, as you know, and we've talked about the design thinking approach that Saks has used to develop the system around locking and unlocking the pouches and things like that. And today, we actually handed out the pouches to the kids, and they locked them right there, and they learned how to use them and had some time to practice. And after speaking with both Dave and Sarah, the buses rolled on time at the end of the day. The kids, the design worked. So the design that the kids and the staff came up with together with strategic locations for the unlocking magnets and some rolling carts and tables that also had them. They were able to line them up. Everyone was there, and the buses rolled right on time. So that's exactly what we hoped for. Day two tomorrow is the real test, because we'll start our day with them coming in and locking them, and then end it with them unlocking at the end of the day. But by all accounts, all the folks I've talked to, it was an excellent start. So we're off to a very good start with that over at the middle school. And once things really sort of hit their stride, we'll have the administration come and talk to us about it and get specific. I don't want to steal their thunder by going into too many details, because it really is a very impressive way to approach this question and to solve this problem, where so many districts are doing this for disciplinary type reasons. Here, what we're really focusing on is doing it with the kids and doing it to help them to develop systems that empower them to develop healthy relationships with their personal tech, right? It's not, we're just punishing them, taking them away. It's really helping them to be a part of the solution in the system so that they can determine how they use it, when they're going to use it, and be in control of that relationship. And that's really important, as we all know. So that's one big announcement, and excited about that. So in a couple of weeks, maybe mid-November or so, we'll have them come. Because we do also have a night that we've been scheduling for November 11th, where we'll have a speaker talk about families and parents and what parents can do to help to manage their kids' tech. And that's really for elementary, middle, and some of the high school grades too, probably. So we'll have them come right around that time to the board and talk about it a bit. And the other quick announcement is just you'll notice a change in your water bottle. We can talk about it later, but we're thinking about moving away from plastic where we can. So instead of plastic bottles, we're using aluminum bottles. As you likely know, plastic, if it's recycled at all, can only typically be recycled once and not back into a water bottle, but into something permanently, where aluminum can be recycled indefinitely. And so this is a bottle you can use. You can wash it, refill it, use it as often as you want. And when you're done with it, recycle it, and it'll be turned into something else useful. And going aluminum, I think, makes a nice difference. So we're going to try it, and the board's welcome to share your feedback one way or the other. A few years ago, we tried boxed water. That lasted one meeting. So I'm a little more optimistic about the aluminum water bottles, but you let me know after a meeting. But I do think it's important as a board for a district to model good stewardship, and this is another way that we can try to do that for everybody. So.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we'll be adjourning to executive session, and we'll be in executive session. The subject to be discussed is collective bargaining and salaries for the New Canaan Education Association. Can I get a motion to adjourn to executive session, please? Brendan, second Wexler, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. And we're adjourning to executive session. Thank you.
Thank you.